There has always been something grand about the British fighting machine. The modern history of this nation as a fighting force is one of which we can all be proud. And once again, our forces were facing the terrible prospect of battle with an enemy whose fanaticism was reputedly unparalleled in recent times. This program is a tribute to those soldiers, airmen and sailors who, both past and present, risk making the ultimate sacrifice to do their duty for Queen and country. The war really begins from the moment Saddam Hussein, president of Iraq, launches his troops into Kuwait. These are spearheaded by 100,000 of his Republican Guard, supported by helicopter gunships, armored personnel carriers, mobile artillery, and tanks. The tiny Kuwaiti armed forces cannot hope to hold out against the battle-hardened Iraqi troops. Although Iraq has always considered Kuwait a part of its own territory, their public reason for the invasion is to prevent Kuwait's oil being sold cheaply. That keeps Gulf oil prices down generally, and Iraq needs to sell its own oil for higher prices. Immediately the invasion begins, the United Nations Security Council condemns it. Moscow stops arms shipments to Baghdad, and the West begins freezing all Iraqi and Kuwaiti assets. The next day, the Americans announce they'll be sending a naval task force to the Gulf. Iraq moves its troops closer to the border with Saudi Arabia, and fears grow that the Middle East's richest oil nation might be occupied as well. The American response is to begin what becomes the most impressive logistic military operation since World War II. 4,000 troops of the US 82nd Airborne Division, the elite American paratroopers, along with F-15 and A-10 aircraft, are immediately flown to Saudi Arabia. They're the spearhead of a force that within 6 months will number 1 million. Converging in support are nearly 50 American, British, French and Soviet warships. Special forces are undoubtedly flown in too. The diplomatic war then begins in earnest. Iraq announces the annexation of Kuwait and orders out all the foreign diplomats there. The UN condemns this too. 12 out of 20 Arab countries agree to send military aid to Saudi Arabia. While this is going on, Britain sends in its first squadron of Tornadoes and Jaguars.
The government will contribute forces to a multinational effort for the collective defense of the territory of Saudi Arabia and other threatened states in the area, and in support of the United Nations embargo.
Saddam Hussein says he'll leave Kuwait, but linking it to the condition that Israel withdraws from the territories it occupied during the Arab-Israeli War in 1973. More and more foreigners try to flee Kuwait, but a Briton, Douglas Croskery, is shot while trying to get away. Then a sinister development. Iraq orders 400 Britons and 2,500 Americans to report to hotels or face arrest. They are to be detained and housed at key installations as a human shield against Western attack. The BBC's World Service issues advice from the Foreign Office.
The Iraqis have stated that if the British community do not move voluntarily, they will face unspecified difficulties. If you choose to move, please take all food from your residence with you to give to the hotel management to help their food stocks.
Saddam Hussein's decision is to backfire on him. Those wavering in his support now see the lengths to which he will go to win his so-called holy war. Another 40,000 troops are immediately ordered into Saudi Arabia from the US. And, as well, President Bush sends 20 stealth fighter bombers, some of America's most modern fighter aircraft. In the midst of the diplomatic war and the military build-up, there's one small act of resolve that few will forget. Little Stuart Lockwood is paraded before Iraq's TV cameras to show how well the British hostages are being treated.
Are you getting your milk, Stuart? And with cornflakes too.
His courageous look of defiance and contempt wins the hearts of millions. 3 weeks after the invasion, the UN gives its approval for force to be used to support a trade embargo against Iraq. Britain sends its second squadron of Tornadoes in as the stories of brutality and rape begin to emerge from within Kuwait. Mrs. Thatcher begins to attack Europe for its slow response to the crisis. Slow and patchy, she calls it.
Some of the military support from some countries was much more hesitant, and it was patchy and much later, and that therefore we set out the solution that NATO as such must be more ready to put defensive forces out of area.
Saddam Hussein begins to crack a little. He allows women and children hostages, guests he calls them, to leave. President Gaddafi of Libya, one of his few supporters, offers to supply him with food and fuel. But within 5 weeks of the invasion, American Marines have completed their static defense of Saudi Arabia against invasion from Iraq. It's Margaret Thatcher's cue to announce in a Commons emergency debate British ground troops will be sent to the Gulf. 100,000 US troops are already in place. 3 days later, the US Chief of Staff, Colin Powell, says he has 162,000 troops in theatre. Only a few days after that, Britain announces it will send in the Desert Rats, 6,000 soldiers of the famous 7th Armoured Brigade. They made their name in the North Africa campaign under Montgomery in World War II and were based in West Germany, protecting NATO's front line. Now the war of words begins to hot up. Support for Saddam at home grows to fever pitch. But Israel's Prime Minister Shamir says he'll attack Iraq if the United States doesn't. While the Arab League holds a summit meeting in Cairo, George Habash, leader of the terrorist group PFLP, says his organization will strike US and Western targets the moment the US attacks Iraq. The next day, the military command structures are agreed. Allied troops will be under US command, while in the event of war, overall control rests with the Saudi Arabians. British troops, led by Brigadier General Sir Peter de la Billière, former commanding officer of the SAS, will be under US command.
I'm very much at ease working with the Americans. I fought alongside them in Korea. I've worked with them intermittently throughout the whole of my 39 years in the service.
Everyone knows, though, it will be 4-star General Norman Schwarzkopf who will run the show. A former American footballer, he's called the Bear by his officers and Stormin' Norman by his men.
Let's face it, if he dares come across that border and come down here, I'm completely confident that we're going to kick his butt when he gets here. That's going to be because of you folks right here.
Throughout October, the diplomats try again to resolve the matter. But Baghdad will not withdraw from Kuwait.
Yes, we're going on to Moscow.
So it's on October the 25th that Dick Cheney, the US Defense Secretary, announces that another 150,000 troops will go to Saudi Arabia.
This is a long-term proposition. We're prepared for long haul if that's what it takes to get the job done.
Operation Desert Shield is now at its peak. Thousands of troops, vehicles and machinery, as well as sophisticated radars and advanced signaling and command control equipment, are being moved in by ship and air. Day after day, week after week, the mountainous military force is moved into place. Saddam now threatens to turn the Arab Peninsula into ashes and proclaims that he'll win the war. In response, President Bush orders in another 100,000 troops. Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher reinforces the Allied position in plain English.
The peaceful solution would be for Iraq to get out of Kuwait. That is a matter for them. We hope they will do it. If not, we shall have to take the military option and see that Iraq does leave Kuwait.
Then, on November the 29th, the UN makes the decision which determines that a war is inevitable. If Iraqi forces stay in Kuwait after January the 15th, Allied troops will be permitted to remove them by force. Another crack appears in Saddam Hussein's armor. He releases all the hostages, some of whom were held as human shields and were therefore able to bring back helpful information about targets to the coalition's military planners.
Actually, it'd been better if we'd have probably got home a few days later, because now we've got all the Christmas shopping to do.
Prince Charles visits the Death or Glory Boys, the 17th 21st Lancers, famed for their courage during the charge of the Light Brigade. On the same day, Iraq claims it will not only never give up Kuwait, it will deploy chemical weapons if attacked. It was a situation that concerned the Queen in her Christmas message to the Commonwealth.
The invasion of Kuwait was an example on an international scale of an evil which has beset us at different levels in recent years. Attempts by ruthless people to impose their will on the peaceable majority.
In the new year, another morale-boosting visit comes from the new Prime Minister, John Major. After a few days, the Iraqi and US foreign ministers finally meet face-to-face in Geneva. They're together for 6 hours. The world awaits the outcome. It's stalemate. Iraq will not withdraw from Kuwait, and the Allies will not negotiate anything else until they do. Desert Shield and Desert Sword are soon to become Desert Storm.
I heard nothing today that, in over 6 hours, I heard nothing that suggested to me any Iraqi flexibility whatsoever on complying with the United Nations Security Council resolutions.
It's a most remarkable logistical operation. 650,000 troops, 1,400 tanks, 1,200 armored vehicles and self-propelled artillery, over 500 fighter planes, 300 helicopters, and more than 100 warships, including 5 carrier battle groups, all with the engineering support, medical backup, and command and control structure needed to operate on a desert battlefield or a Gulf Sea. The most potent symbols of Allied determination to expel Iraqi forces from Kuwait and restore the legitimate government are the 3 American battleships, Iowa, Missouri, and Wisconsin. Built during World War II, they were mothballed in the 1950s, but have more recently been modernized and returned to service. Now they sit some 20 miles offshore in the Gulf, each armed with 9 16-inch guns, capable of throwing a shell weighing over 1 ton right into the heart of Iraqi positions. Each ship displaces nearly 60,000 tons and carries a crew of 1,900 officers and men. Even if a missile were to strike one of these ships, it would do little damage, for they are protected by armor plate up to 20 inches thick. 4 of their turrets have now been removed to make way for quadruple launchers for BGM-109 Tomahawk cruise missiles. These can carry nuclear or conventional high-explosive warheads, or a variety of runway cratering sub-munitions. The Tomahawk has a range of some 500 nautical miles, allowing them to hit targets deep inland with pinpoint accuracy. The Tomahawk missile is also carried by the US Navy's Los Angeles-class nuclear submarines, over 50 of which are now in service or being built. Their Tomahawks can reach targets in Iraq while submerged from either the Mediterranean or the Red Sea. The Tomahawk missiles are launched by compressed air from the forward torpedo tubes. When they break surface, their solid fuel rocket motors kick them to a height and speed where their main air-breathing turbojet cuts in and the fins deploy. An onboard computer constantly comparing the scene ahead with the programmed flight plan. This guides the missile unerringly to its target. The US Navy also has several carrier battle groups in the Persian Gulf and Red Sea. The first aircraft carrier on station is the USS Independence, and she is subsequently joined by others of the Forrestal, Kitty Hawk and Nimitz classes. Each of the carriers is protected by the task force of other vessels, including anti-missile cruisers. The carriers are massive floating cities, displacing 80 to 90,000 tons and carrying crews of over 5,000 men, including the air wing. Their principal armament is, of course, their aircraft, and each carrier can accommodate 86 fixed-wing aircraft and helicopters. One of the latest additions to the fleet is the McDonnell Douglas FA-18 Hornet dual-role fighter and attack plane. These are supplemented by Grumman Hawkeye airborne early warning and control aircraft. But the most potent aircraft of all is the Grumman F-14 Tomcat, a big 2-seat swing-wing machine which can carry the Phoenix air-to-air missile, capable of engaging targets over 100 miles distant. Over 130 warships from 28 nations are deployed in the Gulf. First, during the early months of the United Nations economic blockade following the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait, and latterly in the shooting war. They include frigates and destroyers, as well as tankers and fleet replenishment and repair vessels, plus over 30 marine assault vessels. Among the most important types of warships deployed are the mine hunters, which use remotely piloted submersibles as well as conventional sweeping techniques to hunt down and destroy mines sown off the shores of Iraq and Kuwait. The Royal Navy's contribution to the task force is considerable, with more than 20 warships on station, including the ultra-modern Type 42 Batch 3 destroyer HMS Gloucester, alongside her sister ship York and the earlier HMS Cardiff. The Type 42s were the first British warships to be fitted with gas turbine engines, giving them a speed of 30 knots, as well as reducing the number of crew members required to 300. The ships are specifically designed for air defence of the fleet, and their principal weapon is the GWS-30 Sea Dart anti-aircraft missile. This has a range of nearly 20 miles, and in concert with the new Type 996 target acquisition radar and ADAWS computer system, can engage enemy aircraft and missiles in any weather conditions. The Type 42s carry the Westland Lynx HAS-3 as well, a small twin-engined, all-weather, high-performance helicopter. A joint Anglo-French venture, it's designed for the surface search and attack roles and is fitted with sea spray radar, which has over-the-horizon capability. The Lynx can carry a wide variety of different weapons, the Sea Skewer missile in particular having proved itself several times in sinking Iraqi gunboats. Each Lynx can carry 4 of these missiles. Other weapons may include Stingray torpedoes and a machine gun or 20mm cannon. The Lynx accommodates a crew of 3, plus up to 10 Royal Marines, and has a range of over 320 miles, being able to stay in the air for nearly 3 hours. The Lynx frequently operates alongside the larger Sea King, which carries dunking sonar to detect enemy submarines. A great comfort to the crew, especially operating far out across the ocean, is that it can fly on only one engine, although maximum speed is reduced from 135 to 122 knots. Belching a smokescreen, another piece of state-of-the-art equipment deployed in the Gulf is the US Marine Corps' Amphibious Armored Infantry Vehicle, or AAIV-7. To all intents and purposes, this is an armoured personnel carrier which can swim using ducted water jets, even with a strong sea running, allowing it to come ashore through heavy surf. Top speed in the water is 6 knots, but once ashore, the AAIV-7 can manage up to 45 miles per hour, and speed in an amphibious assault is obviously essential. Of all-welded aluminium construction with armour up to 45mm thick, the amphibious carrier can carry 25 Marines in air-conditioned comfort, fully protected against chemical and biological attack. In action, its troops exit through the hydraulic ramp at the back, protected by covering fire laid down by the .50 caliber machine gun in the turret. Another vital weapon in the US Marines inventory is the LCAC, or Landing Craft Air Cushion. This massive 170-ton hovercraft is crewed by only 5 men and propelled by 4 gas turbines, driving 2 enormous ducted fans. It can carry a 60-ton load ashore. This could mean an M1 Abrams, the US Army's main battle tank. The LCAC, with a speed of 50 knots and low pressure on the surface of the water, give it better protection than a conventional landing craft against coastal mines or oil-polluted beaches. It's a pure logistics craft, not designed for the battlefield, so is unarmoured. Another advantage it confers over conventional landing crafts is that the stores it carries get ashore dry rather than wet, which can be vital, especially when it comes to ammunition and explosives. Firing anything up to 4 rounds a minute until the barrel becomes overheated, the Marines can get through a lot of ammunition with their 155mm M198 howitzers. This weapon, which is also used by the armies of several other countries, is a large gun weighing 7 tons and needing a crew of 10, but it can accurately lob a rocket-assisted shell nearly 20 miles. It has a hydro-pneumatic recoil system as well as a double muzzle brake to speed the rate of reloading. And as well as firing all standard 155mm NATO shells, can take the Copperhead laser homing anti-tank round. The standard US Marine tank is the A1 version of the M60, successor to the M48 pattern. It's of cast steel construction with torsion bar suspension for a smooth ride. It mounts the British 105mm L7 gun, the most famous tank gun in the world. The US Marines also make extensive use of the Boeing Vertol CH-46 Sea Knight tactical transport helicopter. A versatile twin-engine machine capable of carrying up to 26 soldiers a distance of 230 miles, or a variety of stores slung under the fuselage. It has a top speed of 168 miles an hour. It can also be kitted out as a gunship, armed with machine guns or chain guns to give fire support to the infantry on the ground. The CH-46 is accompanied into action by one of the most famous helicopters of all time, the Bell AH-1 Huey Cobra. This is a dedicated ground attack machine carrying a multi-barreled minigun under the nose, plus unguided rockets or 8 TOW anti-tank missiles. Perhaps the most spectacular machine in the US Marines arsenal, though, is the AV-8B Harrier vertical or short takeoff and landing strike fighter. Nicknamed the Jump Jet, the Harrier, in its latest form, with composite fibre construction and larger wings, can carry bombs, rockets or missiles in the close ground support role, as well as Sidewinder air-to-air missiles for dogfighting. Powered by a vectored thrust Rolls-Royce Pegasus turbofan, the Harrier II has a tactical combat radius of about 300 miles with full weapons load, and can fly at up to 800 knots in its clean configuration. Far faster than the Harrier is the Sepicat Jaguar Supersonic Attack fighter-bomber, another Anglo-French aeroplane. Like many other weapons, it's having its first real combat experience in the war to expel Saddam Hussein's forces from Kuwait. And just as the Harrier did in the Falklands, it's proving itself an exceptional warplane. A single-seater, it's powered by 2 augmented turbofans, which give it a top speed in excess of Mach 1, even when loaded with bombs, rockets, air-to-air or air-to-surface missiles, and electronic warfare jamming gear. The pilot's head-up display, or HUD, shows him exactly where his target is and allows him to pinpoint his weapon's delivery accurately. It can carry nearly 5 tons of weapons, including a pair of 30mm cannon. Capable of carrying an even more impressive weapons load is the Panavia Tornado. This is another multinational aircraft, developed by Britain, Germany and Italy as an all-purpose strike and air superiority fighter. A swing-wing aircraft with a crew of 2, it can operate by day or night in all weathers. Its enormously powerful turbo-union turbofan engines giving it more than 16,000 pounds thrust each for a top speed of over Mach 2 and a typical combat radius of nearly 900 miles. Because such performance burns fuel at a prodigious rate, Tornadoes are equipped for in-flight refueling from Victor K2 tankers. This is something that can also be done by day or by night using radar and passive light intensifiers, allowing the Tornado's virtually unlimited range or the ability to loiter in a combat zone for several hours at a time. One of the Tornado's principal tasks is runway busting. To do this, the Tornado uses the JP-233 cluster munitions dispenser, twin pods under the fuselage, which disgorge a mixture of parachute-retarded cratering bombs and anti-personnel mines. The typical Tornado mission involves flying at very high speed, only about 50 feet above the ground, frequently skimming through mountain passes to avoid enemy radar detection. This is made possible by a combination of forward-looking and terrain-following radars, which feed the aircraft's computer with the information needed to operate its fly-by-wire controls faster and more accurately than a human pilot could manage. Accuracy is further enhanced in the Gulf by teaming the Tornadoes with Buccaneer S2s. The latter carry laser target designators in their rotating bomb bays to illuminate targets for the paveway smart bombs carried underneath the Tornadoes. This system has proved itself incredibly accurate in hitting precise points on bridges or other difficult targets in Iraq and Kuwait. Another aircraft which has leapt into the limelight in the Gulf is the General Dynamics F-16 Fighting Falcon. An aircraft of almost conventional appearance compared with its swing wing and twin-tailed companions, the F-16 is a pilot's dream, with the ability to pull 9G in a turn without breaking up, and even 5G with a full weapons load. It only has a single afterburning turbofan engine, but can achieve over Mach 2, a combination of power and agility which has found many customers, including Egypt, Israel and Turkey. The F-16 is a multi-role fighter, meaning it can engage other aircraft in air-to-air combat or attack ground targets with a variety of weapons. The aircraft's canopy gives an unsurpassed view, while in pitch dark the head-up display, coupled with the lantern system, shows the pilot exactly where he is in the sky at all times. The war against Iraq has vividly demonstrated the unique capabilities of the lantern equipment. This is carried in 2 pods under the aircraft, one navigating with terrain-following radar and the other pinpointing targets such as tanks for the aircraft's Maverick missiles or laser-guided bombs to destroy. Lantern and other equally sophisticated weapons systems are also used by the McDonnell Douglas F-15. The Eagle has for many years been singled out as the best all-round fighter in the world. This is particularly true since the introduction of the E variant, which is as good in the ground attack role as earlier versions are in dogfighting. Compared with the Falcon, the Eagle is a big aeroplane, 15 feet longer, 10 feet broader, and weighing nearly twice as much. But it has twin afterburning turbofans, which give even higher performance. The original Eagles were single-seaters, but the F-15E carries a crew of 2 and has enhanced avionics and weapons control systems, as well as the ability to carry a greater weight and variety of bombs, missiles and pods. A typical load is 22 Rockeye 1,000-pound iron bombs, which can be delivered with almost predictable accuracy just where the crew want them to go. Designed as a naval replacement for the F-4 Phantom, which would not cost as much as the F-14 Tomcat, the FA-18 Hornet has become the seagoing equivalent of the Air Force's Fighting Falcon, even though many aircraft are these days land-based. It's the usual modern equivalent of an interceptor and attack fighter, being chosen by the US Marines in preference to the F-16 because of its ability to fire the latest radar-guided air-to-air missiles. The cockpit gives excellent vision, and the pilot's task is made easier by the provision of 3 multifunction computer visual display units, which replace almost all conventional cockpit dials and instruments. There had been speculation for years about the shape the United States Air Force's new stealth fighter would take, but nobody was really prepared for the unique Lockheed F-117. This futuristic machine, nurtured under conditions of great secrecy at the world-famous Skunk Works in California, is another weapons platform which has leapt into public prominence as a result of the Gulf conflict. Many details are still top secret, but the whole concept was to make the aircraft practically invisible to either radar or infrared detectors. This has been achieved in an aircraft which is actually so aerodynamically unstable that it would be impossible to fly without a computer to make constant, minute corrections to the control surfaces. Hardly any metal is used in its construction, which is almost all of radar-absorbent reinforced carbon fibre and similar materials coated with ferrite paint, while the engine intakes and exhausts are configured to reduce noise and heat output. Strangely, the first Allied aircraft to arrive in Saudi Arabia are not the newest, but the oldest McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantoms. However, they are the F-4G variant, codenamed Wild Weasel, whose task is to knock out enemy target acquisition, ranging and guidance radars for surface-to-air missiles. The aircraft are equipped to fire both Shrike and Harm anti-radiation missiles. Their crew's mission is a tricky one, because in order to detect the enemy radar sites, they have to switch on their own, making them vulnerable to return fire. Perhaps the one weapon system above all others, which has attracted attention since January 1991, is the Patriot. The Mach 3 missiles have a range of some 40 miles. They're carried in self-propelled launchers, accompanied by a caravan of vehicles carrying their own radars, computers and electricity generators. In the front line on the ground, the M1A1 Abram main battle tank is well equipped to take on all comers. The first really all-new American tank since the 1940s, it incorporates all the benefits of Chobham-style laminate armour for crew protection. Its punch lies in its 120mm smoothbore gun, which can destroy any known tank at over 3 miles range. While a 1,500 horsepower gas turbine gives it a top speed of 45 miles per hour and the agility to get out of trouble fast. Tanks cannot operate efficiently on their own. They need to be accompanied by infantry. To allow the troops to keep up with the armour, the US Army uses the Bradley Mechanized Combat Vehicle. This comes in two forms, the M2 infantry version and the M3 cavalry variant. And the M1 tank commanders appreciate both. Externally, they appear identical, with a launcher for 2 TOW anti-tank missiles on the side of the turret. This, as well as the Hughes 25mm chain gun, also mounted in the turret, can be aimed and fired from within the vehicle without exposing the crew to the enemy or to chemical or biological hazards. The difference between the Bradley M2 and the M3 is that the former carries a squad of infantry, while the latter uses the space for extra TOW missiles. Both vehicles are more mobile than the aging M113 armoured personnel carrier, with a top speed of some 40 miles per hour, while the missile launchers give them great anti-tank capability. Looking like a light tank, although it's classed as a tracked reconnaissance vehicle, the British Scimitar is smaller, lighter and faster than the M3. Even though it's designed for a similar role, it only carries a 30mm Radan cannon, so it does not have an anti-tank capability, this being reserved for other specialised vehicles sharing the same basic chassis and hull. At 60 tons, Britain's Challenger main battle tank is 6 tons heavier than the American Abrams. It's therefore slower, its Rolls-Royce diesel engine giving it a top speed of 35 miles per hour. But it has the superb Chobham armour, said to be the equivalent of more than 2 feet of conventional plate. Its main armament is a new high-pressure 120mm rifled gun, which the British Army believes more accurate than the smoothbore weapon on the American tank. As in the Abrams, the gun is fully stabilised with an integrated fire control system, laser rangefinder and passive light-intensifying sights for use at night. The British Warrior mechanised infantry vehicle is a new vehicle designed to replace the old FV-432 armoured personnel carrier. It has a crew of 2 plus 8 infantrymen carried in the rear and is armed with a 30mm cannon and coaxial 7.62mm chain gun in the turret. Weighing 24 tons, it's also powered by a Rolls-Royce diesel engine which gives a speed of almost 50 miles an hour. Like all modern armoured fighting vehicles, Warrior has full chemical and biological protection. In action, the Warrior will ideally deploy to a hull-down position to allow the infantry to exit through the rear door. British infantry today have as their principal weapon a 5.56mm individual weapon or rifle and a light support weapon or machine gun of the same calibre. They're also equipped with Milan anti-tank missiles, the light weapon and 51mm mortars. Impressive fire support for the infantry is provided by the Chieftain AVRE, or Armoured Vehicle Royal Engineers, armed with a huge 165mm petard mortar designed to blast bunkers and destroy earthworks. One of the vehicle's most useful attributes is its ability to tow the giant Viper mine-clearing equipment. This is specially designed to clear paths through minefields. It consists of a segmented plastic hose, 250 yards long, filled with plastic explosive. A cluster of 8 rockets pulls the hose out across the minefield, and the explosive is then detonated from within the AVRE to clear a path 24 feet wide for the following tanks. The AVRE can also carry fascines to lay over soft ground or to fill ditches. One of the principal anti-tank weapons in the Gulf is the Hughes AH-64 Apache attack helicopter. This two-man machine is fitted with a remotely controlled 30mm chain gun in a ventral mounting, for which 1,200 rounds of ammunition are carried. Additional weapons are carried on underwing pylons. These can include free-fight rocket pods or up to 16 Hellfire anti-tank missiles. The Hellfire is a laser-guided missile with greater range than any other similar system, and a 20-pound hollow-charge warhead capable of destroying any known tank. The Apache is designed for nap-of-the-earth operations, and its 2 turboshaft engines give it top speed of 168 miles an hour. Another potent tank buster is TOW, or Tube-Launched Optically Tracked Wire-Guided Missile. This is used by both US Army and Marine units, and is fitted to helicopters and both armoured and unarmoured vehicles. TOW has a range of some 3 miles and is highly accurate, its 9-pound warhead being capable of defeating most armour. The Gulf conflict has also seen widespread use of remotely piloted vehicles such as the British Army's Midge. These are pilotless photographic reconnaissance machines, quite small and therefore difficult to shoot down. They either carry television cameras to give live coverage, or, in the case of the Midge, stereoscopic cameras which can use ordinary or infrared film. When Midge returns from a sortie, the film is quickly removed and rushed to the field laboratory. The minutely overlapping negatives give a detailed 3-dimensional picture of the enemy positions, which can be used to provide targeting for artillery. Conventional artillery support for ground forces is primarily provided by M109A2 self-propelled guns. One of the most important weapons in the Allied arsenal, and used by the British as well as the American Army, this vehicle carries a 155mm howitzer in a lightly armoured turret. In action, the rear doors are usually left open, but they can be closed to allow the crew to carry on in a battlefield contaminated by chemical or biological weapons. The howitzer has a range of 15 miles using rocket-assisted projectiles, which can have conventional high-explosive, anti-tank or nuclear warheads. 28 rounds are carried inside the M109 itself, with further ammunition being supplied from field support vehicles. The M109 is powered by a turbocharged diesel engine, giving a speed of 35 miles per hour. Even heavier artillery support comes from M110A2 self-propelled 203mm howitzers. These have a range of over 18 miles, and in addition to a heavy conventional high-explosive shell, can also fire dispensers containing nearly 200 grenades or tactical nuclear rounds. The Copperhead round is unique in that it is a laser-guided shell fired from a standard M198 towed or M109 tracked howitzer. The projectile has a range of 10 miles. It's a smart shell which homes in on targets, particularly tanks, marked by laser designators of friendly ground forces or aircraft. Another weapon seeing its combat debut with Britain's forces in the Gulf is MLRS, or Multiple Launch Rocket System. This is designed to supplement conventional artillery pieces and is a highly effective area denial weapon. The vehicle is a modified Bradley with an armoured cab at the front for the crew and a swivelling launcher at the rear for 12 solid fuel rockets. These can be launched singly or in ripple salvos to a range of 18 miles to lay down a saturation barrage on enemy troop or vehicle concentrations. Each rocket contains 644 small hollow charge mines, or the new Sense and Destroy armour warhead with 6 infrared guided sub-munitions, designed like Copperhead to destroy enemy tanks from overhead. For deeply entrenched troops, an anti-personnel minefield can be laid right on top of them. Conventional artillery joins with MLRS to deliver the first blow on the day that Saddam Hussein's final deadline to evacuate Kuwait runs out. Sunday, February the 24th, 1991. The shells and rockets hammer away at Iraqi frontline positions for 2 hours in a bombardment 4 times heavier than that which preceded Montgomery's victory at El Alamein almost exactly 50 years earlier. The bombardment, all along the line between Saudi Arabia, Iraq and Kuwait, is the prelude to Operation Desert Sabre, the long-anticipated ground offensive. The intention is obviously to drive the occupying Iraqi forces out of Kuwait by direct assault. To protect the Allied left flank from counterattack, paratroopers of the American 82nd Airborne Division had dropped around the town of Salman, while the tanks of the French 6th Armoured Division race across the desert to close the gap. The French advanced triumphantly, resistance being swiftly overcome in a landscape reminiscent of that of Mars, the Roman god of war. Iraqi tanks are soon burning furiously, and Saddam Hussein's unwilling conscript soldiers seem eager to surrender. Within hours, villages deep inside Iraq are secured. The speed of the Allied advance causes great confusion to the local population. This success is rapidly followed by a leapfrog movement using the helicopters of the 101st Airborne Division to secure a forward airbase near Nasiriyah on the River Euphrates. From here, the men and assault helicopters, as well as the missile-carrying Apaches, deploy to create an impassable barrier through which the vaunted Iraqi Republican Guard troops in the east of the country will have to fight if they want to escape towards Baghdad. Now the attention shifts to the Kuwaiti border, where strong American and Arab coalition forces begin their long-planned push to liberate the country so cruelly raped by Saddam Hussein. A vital part of the Allied deception plan has been to convince Iraqi intelligence that a major amphibious assault will be launched by the American Marines. Instead, having cleared most of the mines sown during the earlier phase of embargo, the ships stay offshore. The battleships Missouri and Wisconsin, having already done so much with their Tomahawk cruise missiles, now unleash their batteries of 16-inch guns. These pummel army positions in eastern Iraq and Kuwait itself. Even if denied their hoped-for assault from the sea, the men of the American 1st and 2nd Marine Divisions reaped their fair share of glory in the headlong charge overland into Kuwait. British Jaguars support them from the air. There is sporadic and heavy but largely ineffectual resistance from Iraqi gunners. Most men simply ignore it. Saddam Hussein's killing fields, in which he said Allied forces would burn, prove no obstacle, and the tanks and other armoured fighting vehicles encounter few difficulties. Marine Corps M60s are joined by other troops and tanks from Saudi Arabia and Egypt. A few years ago, it would have seemed an unlikely combination. Today, in Kuwait, it works. Those Iraqi tanks which venture out to engage are soon dealt with, and again that multi-launch rocket system comes into its own. Not for nothing do its crews call it the battle winner. Even the tiny Kuwaiti army plays its part, returning joyfully to its home for the first time since August 1990. Kuwaiti Gazelle helicopters armed with anti-tank missile launchers are brought into play during the fierce battle for Kuwait City Airport. Now, with the left and right flanks secured, is the time for the main thrust. It's a massive fingers and thumb hook by the British 1st and the American 1st and 3rd Armoured Divisions, supported by mechanised infantry and yet more helicopters. Abrams tanks of the 3rd Armoured Division spearhead the assault, charging through Iraqi forces demoralised by the weeks of aerial bombing. They're accompanied by American Bradley and British Warrior infantry combat vehicles. The battle does not stop at night. Here, a helicopter gunship has picked out an Iraqi command post using infrared sights. Combat engineers cleared paths through the extensive minefields and ramparts. Then, the Allied forces race forward to exploit the advantage of surprise. With the first line of defences breached, vast convoys of armoured vehicles pour into Kuwait and Iraq. Within hours, the desert is littered with the burning wrecks of Iraqi T-55 and T-72 tanks. Over 200 are destroyed in a single engagement by the British 1st Armoured Division. As the noose tightens around the 42 Iraqi divisions south of Basra, the initial trickle of prisoners becomes a flood. And as dusk falls, the flags of victory flutter over the desert sands. But grim determination shows on the face of British Commander General Sir Peter de la Billière as he arrives for a council of war, since the battle is not yet over. As the advance continues, dozens more British Challenger tanks are loaded onto their transporters. They drive north into Iraq to reinforce the men already in the thick of the fighting. There's no need for concealment, for the Iraqi Air Force has been conspicuous by its absence throughout the conflict. After a pause to check their maps, officers return to their vehicles to resume the advance. The British Challenger tanks, with their thick armour and heavy firepower, overcome everything in their path, supported from overhead by missile-firing Lynx helicopters. Yet more Iraqi tanks are destroyed. There is no hiding place for the Iraqi army, even at night. The ability to fight at night and press home the daylight successes, even in pitch darkness, is one of the principal contributions to the Allied victory. With vehicles and helicopters either fitted with passive light intensifiers or infrared searchlights, and thermal imaging gun sights coupled to laser rangefinders, the Allies have an enormous advantage over their opponents. The tanks continue to press forward under conditions which would have seemed impossible to a Second World War veteran of the desert rats. The constant pressure gives the Iraqis no time to redeploy to face the menace in their rear. As daylight returns, the Challengers, Lynx helicopters and Warrior infantry vehicles of the 4th and 7th Armoured Brigades keep up the momentum, giving the enemy no respite. When an Iraqi tank does stop to fight, it is speedily dealt with, thanks to the sheer professional skill of the British Army. As resistance crumbles and the survivors from over 40 Iraqi divisions are herded into captivity, the logistic problems mount. Most of the prisoners sitting disconsolately on the sand are not only tired and scared, but also hungry. For the Allied air offensive has wrecked their lines of supply. Now, with final victory clearly in sight, the desert rats press on with confidence. The men of the American 1st Armored Division, the Big Red One, put up a welcoming sign for the arrival of the man who made victory possible, the man they nicknamed the Bear, General Norman Schwarzkopf.
Any significance, sir, that to negotiate? Now, I don't want him embarrassed in any way, right? No, sir. Okay, I don't want him humiliated.
Finally, on February the 28th, after exactly 100 hours, Operation Desert Sabre is over, and the officers of both sides sit down to agree ceasefire terms. One of the Allies' main concerns is for the prompt release of prisoners, principally air crews shot down earlier in the campaign.
On both sides, that we have a symbolic release immediately. And I feel sure, based upon our discussions, that such a symbolic release should take place.
President Saddam Hussein begins releasing prisoners almost immediately. It is, he says, an act of good faith. After a shower and the first good meal they have had for days, or in some cases weeks, the returned prisoners are in good spirits when they meet the press. But the strain of their ordeal is clearly visible. After their public appearance, they're taken off by ambulance for a thorough check. Even with the war brought to a successful conclusion, there is now the problem of rebuilding Kuwait. Over 500 of the country's oil wells have been set alight by retreating Iraqi troops in a last gesture of ecological terrorism. Many of them will burn for years, spreading pollution into the atmosphere. But at least, thanks to British force of arms, the Kuwaiti people can return to their homes in freedom.